Hello there, welcome to my channel. This is the fourth video in, I guess, a four-part series around the Viwoods AiPaper Mini. This is a device that the Viwoods company sent to me. It's the first time I've ever reviewed a pre-production model. So it's been a really fascinating process, and that's why I'm a little unsure about whether this will be the last video or not. I suspect that this video will essentially end the primary review series, but there'll probably be follow-ups after this if there are notable updates on the device subsequent to me publishing this video. As I said, this is the culmination of a generally four-part series. Part one was really just focused on the unboxing and giving a little bit of background on the device. Part two was an intensive visual tour of most of the features of the device. Then we really honed in on part three on the AI aspects of it. You'll definitely want to check that out if you want to see what AI aspects are useful or not useful. And then that culminates here in this video. In this video, we're going to be going over, the battery life of the device. We're going to go over a pros and cons review. Just before that, we'll start going over some other features that are either new since we filmed last or maybe didn't know about previously. And then I'll wrap it all up with my final thoughts about the device and who it's for. So that's kind of the hope of this video. Again, a little bit of a caveat here is that this is a production device. So it's subject to change. Who knows what the final device will look like when it hits market. But what I'm going to do in this video is just focus on the device that's in front of me. This is being filmed on the 8th of September of 2024. So that's basically how the AiPaper Mini looks as of that date. And as again, any changes, we'll probably do some addendums down the line if it's relevant. Okay, with that in mind, we got a lot of territory to cover, so let's get on into it. Okay, I want to talk about some features that either I became aware of after I did my last filming or were added. There have been 3 firmware updates since I've received this device just a few weeks ago, so it's a pretty dynamic environment for this particular item. Now, I should point out that for the demonstration of these features, I do have front lighting on. You can see I have brightness set to 12, and that's to help it just kind of stand out more as I'm doing the top-down camera. Now, the first feature I want to talk about is there is a task manager tray, and you do that by long pressing on the home button. So we'll go ahead and do that now. And there's the tray. As you would expect, you can click on any of the particular apps to go straight into those apps. You can clear them out if you'd like, or you can clear all of them out with that button there. And we'll do that now. One of the things that I discovered is that hidden inside the spine of the case, there is actually a section that houses spare nibs. And you can notice it there. You can see there's a little section there and there's a little dot. And I can use this tool, this SIM card tool. This is my own tool, it didn't come with the device, to go ahead and pull that out. So let's do that now. And then that reveals a couple nibs. Now you'll notice, and we'll go ahead and pull both of those nibs out, that they're different. One of the nibs is a soft nib, and that's the one with the metal shaft. And then there's one that doesn't have a metal shaft, it's just plastic, and this is the harder nib. So let's go ahead and try both of those and see what that sounds like in the stylus. Okay, we're going to start with the soft nib. Okay, I'm not sure if you heard it, but I wrote the word soft and then I did that scribble. Let's try the hard nib. And there it is. I kind of prefer the hard nib. I think it gives a little bit more of a prominent sound, and I like the tips better. It's a little more of a point, where the soft nibs are a little more of a curved point. But both are good. It did come with 2 soft nibs and 1 hard nib, at least in my pre-production example. One of the changes that was made since my last filming is the adding of a highlighter. So if we go over here to the pen tray, and click on that, you'll notice that there is a new highlighter item, although they're currently labeling it as pencil. So that's something they're going to have to fix. But let's go ahead and let's go to the thickest setting and see it in action. There we go. And if we go ahead and click on that again, we'll just, for contrast, do the thinnest. And of course, you have the 3-line options in between. Now, in addition to the note-taking or paper app, you also have the highlighter function available in the documents, or what they call the learning app. So you click on the tray, you can see the highlighter there, and you can see it comes in 4 different colors. So we'll go ahead and do pink here. We'll do yellow. We'll do blue. And finally, we'll do purple. Obviously, all these are in some form of grayscale here, but when you export the document, you can see the colors. One of the more fun features that were added is an ability to link your meeting minutes to the calendar. So let's go ahead and click on this faux meeting. And then if we click on these 3 dots, you'll notice that there's this option to associate with daily. So we'll click on that. And then it's going to default to your current date, although you could pick whatever date you want. And you click confirm. So let's go ahead and move into that calendar app. And here it is, and you'll notice that there's now this little icon in the lower right corner. And if I click on that icon, you now see your meeting, and if there are multiple meetings, they would be listed here below, and you can actually hyperlink back by clicking on that. Okay, one of the functions here in the drop-down bar, this contrast button, I actually labeled it incorrectly. I'd indicated that only in fast mode or ultra fast mode was that feature available. But you notice if I click on ultra fast mode here in the main UI, it's not available. The reason why is it actually is only available for applications. So if I go ahead and go into Chrome, and I do the drop-down bar, now I can click it, and I can get the contrast bar. And it doesn't matter what refresh mode I'm in, that's available. So we'll just show for demonstration, if we go to the lowest contrast, you can see it becomes quite pale, and then the highest contrast, of course, makes it much darker, and there's a point in the middle. Since my last filming, they've added 2 new AI features, and these appear both in the paper or note-taking app as well as the meeting app. So I'll just demonstrate them here in the note-taking app. So let's go ahead and bring in our system bar. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the AI icon. And now you have a couple new options here. You have the ability to either go to an AI assistant or to create a customized query. So let's go ahead and start with the AI assistant. So by clicking on that, we're going to see the familiar chatbot interface, but our notes, that one page of notes, will be included as part of the query. So let's go ahead and run a query and see what that looks like. Okay, I went ahead and typed in summarize this document, so let's go ahead and send that and see what comes back. All right, and it gives us a pretty simple explanation. This is not obviously a particularly insightful query, but it wasn't set up to be that. What I like about this is the fact that not only can you write a more specific query, but you can then use your notes, so you get a lot more control now over the type of information you want back based on what you're submitting. This I would give 3 stars because I think it just offers a lot of flexibility in how you write your queries. And you could write your queries not in a banal way, as I did here, but in a way that potentially brings you back useful information. Now, the other AI addition is around this ability to customize queries. And we've seen I've done 4 of them here. Let me click on that customize button. And so basically what you have is you'll write in the name of your AI command, and then you'll basically write out your query here, so that once you do that and you confirm it, it will save that as a query. So as I mentioned, I've already done a few of these. Let's go ahead, for example, and do the define query. In the define query, I basically said define all the words on the page. Let's go ahead and do that. And it's thinking about it. And there it is. And of course, you can go from top to bottom, and it basically does definitions of the things that were listed. So you can do a number of different queries. This is just one example. It's really only limited to how you want to structure it. In my case, I do one where I'll give me 1,000 word summary. I'll do research, so give me information that's based on what you're finding on the page. And this is a good query if you're trying to basically find sources that you want to do continued research. Actually, let's go ahead and do that as an example. So I'm just going to write in here comic books. And I want to know what resources I can use to research this more. So I'm going to click on the AI tool. I'm going to click on my research query. It's going to go ahead and think about it. And there it is. So here are some examples of various sources that you can use to look further. Here's some websites, a couple magazines, some YouTube channels, some podcasts, and some online communities. So a lot of information now that if I wanted to research comic books more, I've now got places to go to do that. And of course, as always, you can copy and share accordingly. So that's just an example of how you can start to create queries that might make a little bit more sense, a little bit more focused on the type of information or things that you're looking for. So I really like this customization function because it starts focusing the AI tools to make them even more useful. I'm going to give this 3 stars. The last thing I'll say about this is that you can't change a query once that it's been written, but you can delete it. So if I long press, for example, I now have the ability to delete these queries accordingly. I should point out that at this point in time, as of this filming, there is a functionality in the Mail app where if you click on the AI button, you can generate an email. I've gotten this query to work in the past, but as I'm filming now, it won't generate any results. I'll go ahead and show that in action. So this is a bug that they're going to have to address, but basically the idea is it would take your handwritten notes and put it into a more formal structure that you could then copy and send out. So instead of sending your handwriting or just doing a simple conversion of text, you can create a little more structure in terms of what you've written into a formal email. But right now, the feature is not operating properly. Okay, I conducted a number of tests on the Viwoods AiPaper Mini's battery, and I'm going to compare those results to a couple key competitors in the same size class. So all these devices have what we would call 8-inch screens, which range from 7.8 to 8.2 inches. Now, of these 4 devices, the Viwoods has the smallest battery at 2450 milliampere hours. You've got the Nomad there at 2700, the Bigme S6 Plus Lite, slightly bigger at 3000, and the Books Tab Mini C with a whopping 5000 milliampere hour battery. So there's a number of tests we're going to go through, and we're going to start off by standby with the screen off. So this is when the device, the screen is currently in the off position, but at just one press of the power button, you can get into the device and in 1 or 2 seconds basically start operating the device. So it's not shut off, it's basically in a sleep mode. And so what we're measuring here in all these categories is the battery drain per hour. So in the case of the Viwoods Mini, that battery drain was 0.14%. So kind of in the middle of the pack, not nearly as good as the Books Tab Mini. And we're going to see that through a lot of these battery tests, that large battery really works in the Mini's favor, but not the worst either. And remember, the Viwoods Mini has the smallest of the batteries, so not to be in last place in these categories is fairly notable. Let's move on to the screen on version of standby. So this is when the device can at any time be interacted with. It's not in sleep mode, but it's not active either. It's just the screen is there. You can take your stylus and start writing at any time, but nothing else is happening during the actual testing. So how much battery drain takes place in just having it in this state of readiness? And for the Viwoods Mini, it was 1.5%, again in a familiar position of being in third place on this table, with the Tab Mini and the Nomad having the best numbers. Then we'll move over to Wi-Fi. So this is when Wi-Fi is on, but it's not active. So it's just basically, pinging the internet as it would normally would, but not actually actively downloading. So how much drain do we have in just having the Wi-Fi set to on? And for the Viwoods, it's 1.9%, one of its strongest showings so far. Certainly not the best, but in second place behind the Books Tab Mini C. We also measured front lighting. In this case, the Nomad falls off the list because it doesn't have front lighting. But we'll start off with front lighting full cold. I always do my tests with cold lighting, so it's coincidental that the Viwoods Mini only has cold lighting. But in this particular case, the Viwoods actually beat the field at 3.1%, with the Big Me S6 Plus, as usual, taking last place. Half front lighting, a little bit of a different story. The Viwoods was in the middle of the pack, although close to the bottom at 2.6%. We return to the full group in a couple activities. One is looking at either a Kindle or Kobo novel, and actually in this case, the Viwoods, the Big Me, and the books were all measured using the Kobo app, whereas the Nomad was measured using the Kindle app. The reason for that discrepancy is the Nomad only has Kindle natively on the device. Otherwise, I default to the Kobo app, which just happens to be my personal favorite. This is a reading test to see how much strain takes place. It usually lasts between 1 to 2 hours. And in this particular case, there was a 2.4% battery drain, again, putting it in the middle of the pack, although notably better than the Nomad. And of course, once again, the Books Tab Mini C has the best results. The continuous note-taking test is kind of an obscure test, but again, all devices are tested in the same way. And it's meant to kind of get a sense of the relative drain of what it's like when you're using note-taking. Now, the way the test works is I basically start the clock and I just start writing continuously with no breaks for at least 10 minutes. Then I'll gauge where the battery drain is, and then every 30 seconds I'll keep writing, and then I'll check the battery counter until it turns so that I can have a more exact measurement of the battery drain. And in this case, the Viwoods Mini did a 12.8%, which is respectable on the table, but again, nowhere close to the Tab Mini C. So the themes here across all these battery tests are pretty consistent. The Viwoods never placed last, despite the fact that it had the smallest battery, but generally placed in third place, sometimes second, and in one case in first place. So overall, a pretty good showing by the Viwoods. Its battery life is definitely comparable to other competitors in this area, despite having the small battery size. Of course, the big exception is the Books Tab Mini C. Their massive battery delivered the results you'd expect, given its size. And of course, the trade-off for that is that the Mini C is much heavier, and where the Viwoods is lighter. So that's the trade-off. If you're looking for something with great battery life, you would pretty much, in the size class, you would pretty much go with the Mini C, hands down. But if you're looking at more of a balance and with a lighter device, then the Viwoods Mini performed fairly well. So now let's talk about the pros and cons of this production model of the Viwoods Mini. I separate this out by primary and secondary. We're going to start with primary. And these are the attributes that are most likely going to drive a buying decision. These are kind of the headliners, if you will, both good and bad. So we're going to begin with the AI integration that's really well done in the sense that the places where it's most effective and the queries are the most powerful are the places where it can bring the most value. Whether that's the haptic button that allows you to pull up the ChatGPT interface no matter where you are in the device, or it's the features in the Paper app, which is their note-taking app, which is really their primary application. The most useful elements of AI are right there where you need it. And those were all demonstrated in my prior video. So that's the first thing I would point to. The second thing I would point to is the physical design of the device. It's light and thin, particularly for an 8-inch device. And it's really notable. When I take this device outside of its case and hold it, whether I'm going to do reading or whatever, you really notice that lightness and that thinness. Yes, it's heavier than maybe a 6-inch or 7-inch dedicated reader is, but for what it delivers, it's quite impressive. The note-taking application, very similar to Remarkable. Definitely it was modeled after Remarkable, both in terms of the things that it can do, as well as some of the simplicity. Remarkable is well known for having a solid note-taking app, and that's definitely the case here. Virtually anything Remarkable can do can be done here. A couple minor exceptions, like for example, checkboxes are not available on the Viwoods device, but outside of that, it really is pretty close to a carbon copy of what Remarkable offers, and it's well implemented. It's a solid e-reader. It's got the front lighting, which allows you to read regardless of your environment. It's got key apps like Kindle and Kobo and Libby. It's got other reading apps like Financial Times, New York Times, etc. Yes, the App Store is limited, but it really nails the most important apps available. And it helps to strike this balance between being a note-taking device and a reading device at the same time. Not to mention the fact that EPUBs also perform really well. Now let's start focusing then on some of the cons of the device. And we'll start off with no ability to sync notes. Some other device manufacturers have either their own services or they allow you to use other services like, say, Google or OneDrive, and that allows you to automatically sync your notes where you don't even have to do anything in order to copy them onto the cloud. That's not the case here. Yes, you do have the ability to work with apps like OneDrive and pCloud, but there's no automatic sync function. Everything you do related to those is manual. So that's definitely something that you'd want to consider. And a key difference between Viwoods and Remarkable, because Remarkable, at least with a subscription, has a pretty robust cloud storage and syncing process. And of course, no storage of notes at all with the Viwoods. It has a ViTransfer app that allows you to kind of temporarily move documents to a portal to then be moved elsewhere, but no place where you can go at any time to see all of your notes online. It pretty much just rests on the device unless you try to do a manual move of those outside the device. It's not as detailed as other note takers. If you're a Books or a Supernote fan, you're not going to probably turn to the Viwoods unless you're really into the AI functionality. I'll just give, for those people that may not be as familiar with those other manufacturers, a sense of the key differences, at least grouped into major categories. The first difference, I would say, is links. Both Supernote as well as Books devices allow you to link to files, to web pages, to other notebooks, to pages within a notebook. So you can have a lot of referencing with links or a lot of shortcuts. You don't have that ability with the Viwoods. In addition to that, there's another really broad category I'd point to, which is called kind of search and reference. And this is kind of a whole suite of features that things like the Books and Supernote have, that the Viwoods doesn't have. So tags is a great example. So Viwoods, and Remarkable for that matter, do have tags that for a particular page or for a particular notebook, but in the ecosystems of Books and Supernote, tags in Supernote are known as keywords, then you can basically identify not just a page, but a particular word or a sentence or a paragraph or what have you. So you can be much more specific, and of course then you can search on those, both within a notebook and across notebooks. So it's a much more powerful search functionality. But it doesn't end there. The Remarkable has other features. The Supernote has other features such as the star marking system, such as headers, and both Books and Supernote both have handwriting recognition, and I can keep going. I mean, there's a few other tools available as well. So very robust with Supernote and Books around these kind of search and reference type of tools that you just don't have replicated in either Remarkable or with Viwoods. The last thing I'll point out, and this is more true, I would say, of Books, but it's customization. Books isn't completely customizable, but it's very customizable, and certainly more so than any other device manufacturer in this space. Viwoods is not nearly as customizable. In fact, there's very little customization available. So those are the key differences I would point to between the note-taking app on Viwoods and what you see on Books and Supernote devices. The size of the device at 8 inches is already inherently bad to try to view PDFs, which are really made for larger page sizes. But in addition to that, the app itself, which is very basic, doesn't really give you the tools to be able to effectively resize a PDF to make it work. So I would forget about reading or annotating PDFs on this device. Could it be done? Yes, it could be done. But it's a really strange experience, in my opinion. The text is very small. You'd have to have really good eyesight for that to work. I would just recommend against that. So if you were thinking or was someone that was really focused on reading and annotating PDFs, this device is not really the one for you. Now, the last thing I'm going to point out, and this is a placeholder, is around price. And the reason why I'm putting this here is because on the Kickstarter campaign, they indicate an MSRP of about $600. Now, we're going to show later in this video kind of a comparison grid to other players in this space. And as you'll see in that grid, $600 really is well outside of what the market has basically priced these size devices at. Having said that, though, this is only a placeholder for 2 reasons. Number one, the Kickstarter campaign price is very reasonable and is really an excellent deal, in my opinion. And number 2, how much do we want to believe in the MSRP price? It's not uncommon for other manufacturers to say, here's what our suggested price is, but never actually sell at that price. So it's possible that Viwoods will finally sell the Mini at a price higher than the Kickstarter campaign, which is what you'd expect, but much lower than what they're indicating. I have no idea, I'm just speculating on that, but if the price is the MSRP price, then it does belong here. And if it's a price closer to the Kickstarter price, or even a little bit more, then I would definitely take price off this list. But for now, we're going to keep it as a placeholder. Okay, so now we're going to start looking at the secondary pros and cons. And these are the things that I think people will notice that might be important to people, but won't necessarily drive a buying decision. I like having it classified like this because it allows me to make observations about various aspects of the device, but without blowing them too far out of proportion. Our list is going to start off with apps. So the app selection isn't tremendous, but it's very focused, it's well curated, and I think it's a really nice addition. If you have a Remarkable device, you have no access to apps. So this is a really nice add of functionality compared to maybe what people are used to with the Remarkable. Not as robust, of course, as what you see with Books, but still, it's pretty good. The battery life is decent. I won't go too much further than that, as we did share battery details earlier in the video. But even if you discount the trade-off between the weight of the device, just alone, just looking at the results, they're very reasonable within the competition that they're up against. The haptic buttons are fantastic. I really like them. I never would have said that, yeah, what I want on a device are buttons. I've never felt that with, say, a Books device or with a Supernote device. But here they work great. I've never accidentally pressed the AI button. Just really well implemented and no problems with them at all. The hardware is well made, particularly on the device itself. There's no flaws that I can see. The cover and stylus are, they're good, but they're not as great, I would say, as the device, but they're all both quite solid. Minimal ghosting. The device definitely has ghosting. There's no question about that. But when it happens, it's much more minimal. It's much more faded in the background. I worried when I first learned that the only way to refresh the screen is to swipe down on the menu tray and then press the button. Most other devices that have a refresh setting have it with one swipe, whether that's a customized gesture or it's a super note sidebar. So I wasn't sure how that was going to play out, but as it turns out, I find myself rarely reaching for that button. So it actually performs quite well, just inherently in how it's programmed. The nibs being stored in the case is a really nice and interesting touch. This has strong voice and handwriting recognition. I don't think it ever got any of my voice inputs wrong. Handwriting recognition was a little bit more hit and miss, generally more hit than not, certainly not perfect. But these are critical. If you're going to have AI tools, you don't want to have the frustration of having to redo your queries because the device didn't capture what you wanted. And I never felt that way. I always felt like they did a great job of translating my handwriting into a query or my voice commands. So I'm not saying that this particular device is better than the competition, but it's solid and it needed to be solid. The ViTransfer app works really well. So we talked in the primary cons about the fact that there's no automatic sync, but there is a manual sync process, and the ViTransfer app is actually one of the best apps that I've used to do that. You go into the app, you can select either whole folders or particular files that you want to transfer. You transfer those up to the cloud and they stay up there for a prescribed period of time. You can set that anywhere from 30 minutes to 24 hours. You go into the online portal and then you have the option of downloading, and oftentimes, depending on the file type, you get to choose what format that downloads in. I prefer to download as PDFs. They do allow PNGs as well. Just depends on what you're downloading. But it's a pretty smooth process, and you download those on your computer and then you can save those files anywhere you want on your computer. So very impressive, not as good as a sync feature that we see on devices like Supernote and Books, but a really nice second best alternative. The UI is snappy and responsive. A little bit of, you have to be very intentional if you're doing finger gestures on the top of the screen or sometimes in the footer, like when you're trying to move between pages of a notebook. But other than that, that's the only issues I found. And using the stylus is even more reliable than touch. So really nice job in kind of having a very kind of snappy and responsive UI. Finally, we've got this 297 ppi screen. Maybe a few months ago, I would have put this as a primary pro, but now we're at the place where we're starting to see almost every new device, not every new device, but almost every new device coming out with a 300 ppi screen. It's starting to become the expectation, so I moved it down as a secondary consideration. Okay, let's go into the cons, and this list, more than any other, is a little bit subject to change because we are still reviewing a pre-production model. This is roughly the middle of September, and there's been a number of updates in the short period of time I've had the device. I expect more, including some that will address some of these issues, but I have to call the issues out as I see them at the time of this review. And that starts off with a few bugs that remain. When I first got the device, there were a ton of bugs in the device. In fact, I was a little worried about it because really, it was going to be unusable based on its state. That has been rectified significantly, and there's only a kind of small list of things that still need to be resolved. We covered a little bit of that in the beginning of this video. Things like the marker is labeled as or the highlighter is labeled as a pencil. Things that the AI functionality in the email is not working right now. You can't have your annotations exported currently if it's on one of your PDF or EPUB files. So there are things like that that still need to be resolved, but I would be shocked if those were issues by the time that the Mini actually gets released, based on what I've seen so far. But as of right now, that does present a little bit of a concern. However, most of the experience isn't buggy at all. It's really well polished. They just got to kink out a few of these things. The device only works in portrait orientation. There's no landscape. So that's another factor that makes it difficult to read PDFs on the device. You've only got that one orientation. The eraser button and the end cap on the stylus is only a stroke eraser. I would rather see the button be a lasso tool and then the end cap be an area eraser. I did let Viwoods know about that, and they said they would put it on their roadmap, but as of right now, this is the way it is. But hopefully it'll be more customizable in the future. Yes, it has apps, but very limited. It's not any app that you want. If you want Google Books, you're out of luck. If you want Barnes & Noble, you're out of luck. Certainly if you want Google News or Google Docs and etc. or Sheets, you're out of luck. Same with the Office suite. So it's not a fully functional app store. It's a curated app store, but certainly for a lot of people, it's probably going to miss something that you otherwise would have wanted. When they do updates, there's no change logs. So that's something that I did bring up to them as well, and hopefully will change. But right now, you have no idea what features got added or what problems got fixed based on their updates. There's no speakers in the device, and there's also no audio apps. Now, there is the ability to have Bluetooth devices, so presumably you could use the web browser, which is Chrome, in order to kind of listen to videos or audio books, but that's it. So that's kind of a workaround in my mind, so it's a con, and as I said, there's no video apps. No warm front lighting. Now, I'm a cold lighting kind of guy, but I know a lot of other people like warm lighting. But even in my case, in order to get kind of the best kind of whitish glow to the light, it's usually a lot of cold and a little bit of warm. So you don't have that ability here, just the cold lighting. AI is implemented really well, but there are places where it feels kind of extraneous and it doesn't add a lot of value. I went in great detail in the previous video about that, but that certainly needs to be called out here on the cons. Some features are hard to know, and this kind of goes back to that changelog comment. So there's a number of features about this device I only know when I watched other YouTubers. For example, I didn't know about the nibs in the case. I didn't know about shape perfection, and I didn't know about the task manager tray. All those things I had to watch other videos to find out. So there's a gap here where someone getting the device is going to have access to a lot of functionality. They just won't know it's there, the way it's currently construed anyway. And then the last thing I'll point to is that when you do the main haptic button and you get that chatbot interface and you put in a verbal command, the moment you stop to the moment that command is sent to the servers is a really long 12 seconds. Now, 12 seconds may not seem like much, but you're going to have additional time after that as it processes your query and then, of course, returns the results. So it would have been great if they could have shortened that. This is another thing that I've raised to their attention, and they might potentially adjust going forward. But for now, it's a pretty long wait from ending your voice input to it sending it to the servers. Okay, so given all of those pros and cons, would I recommend the Viwoods Mini? And the answer is yes, with one caveat. And to be clear, when I say I'd recommend it, I mean all the good and bad points I listed as of right now, I would recommend the device. I'm not saying that based on my hopes and expectations of how the device might change. I'm just saying that based on what the device does currently. The pros, I think, are really solid, and the cons, I think, are reasonable, and they don't ruin the experience. So the package is there. The only caveat I have to any of that is the price. It's recommended, but if you get to a price point that's too far out of line with other competitors, then I wouldn't be able to recommend it, but it would be based on that dimension alone. So that's the one thing we don't know. What will be the eventual market price of the Mini? And that price would determine if the recommendation holds or not. So who is this device for then? I mean, who might be interested in this device? Well, I'd point to a few things. First off, it is really well balanced between the note-taking and the reading. So someone's looking for that type of balance would definitely want to consider the Viwoods. If you were in the Remarkable camp, you really enjoy the Remarkable device, but you were looking for a smaller one and with and are okay with additional functionality, then this would be the device for you. I think that the way the note-taking app is structured, it's great for kind of creative writing and brainstorming, as well as research, like student research or research on projects. I think all those things are things where the AI features can come into play and have the most relevance. So those are the use cases that I think are the most predominant, and if those sing to you, then this is a device you definitely want to consider. Having said that, though, I do want to show this particular grid, and this is basically the 5 devices that are probably the most relevant, in my opinion, in the 8-inch space, going from Mobiscribe to the BigMe S6 Plus to the Books Mini C to the Supernote Nomad, and of course the Viwoods Mini. There's one thing that all of these devices have in common, and I actually recommend them all. So this is a really competitive product class. There's a lot of great players out there. And so it's not a question of which one is good. It's a question of which one meets your needs. So I tried to put together this table that kind of helps summarize what needs each one focuses on to see which one might be the most relevant for you if you were considering something in this size class. So if we start off, for example, with the Mobiscribe is the cheapest on the list. And it's really kind of travel oriented. It's got a pretty good note-taking app. It's somewhat at the complexity level of the Viwoods, not as complicated as Books or Supernote, and that's what the L's represent, by the way. So level 1 would be like an Amazon or a Kobo. Level 2 is BigMe. 3 is a Mobiscribe, Remarkable, Viwoods. And then level 4 is be a Books or Supernote. And all those levels simply mean how many features does the note-taking app have, and it goes from simpler to most complicated. So that's what that represents. But moving along the table, you've got the BigMe S6 Color Plus Lite, a device I've recommended and given an award to earlier in the year. Comes in at a great price point. You've got access to all the Google Play apps. You've got color, and you've got front lighting, so it makes a fantastic e-reader. And it's not in the note-taking app, while not as sophisticated as others, kind of works better in that smaller form factor. So that's what that device has going for it. Of course, you have the Books Tab Mini C. This is the device that just aced all of the battery tests relative to its competitors. A lot of the same features as the BigMe device. The key differentiator, of course, is that the Books note-taking app is much more sophisticated. So again, if you need that search and reference functionality, the customization, or the links, then you would definitely look toward the Books device out of all these devices listed. Then you've got the Supernote Nomad. I would argue the most, or the strongest, I should say, note-taking apps of all of these devices. Not as complicated as Books, but a little more curated, a little better thoughtful in terms of flow. Just really well done. The Supernote is a device, not the Nomad, but the A5X is a device I use at work, and I rely on it heavily for note-taking, and flow is super important, and it nails it. The Nomad, of course, does as well, and that's the device you'd go for if you were super laser focused on a really powerful note-taking app. And then the last one, of course, is the Viwoods Mini. We've just done the full review, and again, great app, got the AI integration, you've got front lighting, and you've got some key apps. So yeah, there's the grid. So all these are good devices. It's only a question of what you're hoping to get out of the device would determine which on this list that would be best for you. But certainly the Viwoods Mini is very much a strong contender on this list. And as you can note here on the pricing, I did put the current Kickstarter campaign price with the question marks at the end. Just my thinking, generally speaking, is if they can sell this roughly in the price range of the Nomad, I think it would be competitive in my opinion, given all the stuff that it delivers. Outside of that, probably not. But we'll see what happens. Okay, I wanted to close out this video series by talking about my use cases and the devices I use. I review a lot of devices, and people often ask me, well, I've done my review, I've moved on. They'll ask me, well, what are you doing with the device now? And a lot of times it's in a drawer. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's not a good device. A lot of good devices are in that drawer. I can only have so many devices at once. So right now, what I do is I've got the Supernote A5X. That's my daily driver for work. At home, I have the Note Air 3C, and that's a device that I use a lot actually in recording these videos. So a lot of times I'll do an outline of the video with its origami folder and its access to the Microsoft Word app. I have it in front of me, and that's what I'll use to guide me through recording of a video. So it's kind of useful in that flow. And it's also great because it has color, of course, so for color note-taking. And then I have a few devices that I use as e-readers. I've got the Bigme S6 Color Plus, which is kind of my go-to e-reader right now. And then I have the Kobo Ellipsa 2E, which I'll use as an e-reader if I want to read more on like a hardcover size page as opposed to a softcover size page. So 4 devices in my rotation. So where will the Viwoods fit in? Is it going to be replacing any of those things, or is it going to be going into the drawer? And I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about it. You know, there's a lot I like about this device. I don't want to put it in the drawer. I like the AI tools. I really like the note-taking app. And usually when I'm writing notes on a smaller form factor, like an 8-inch screen, I'm less interested in the more complicated features that are so important to me as I use on the 10-inch devices. So I might just keep this as an e-reader, and I might replace one of my other devices, or I might just keep it and have now 5 devices in my rotation. I can't believe I'm saying that, but that might be where I end up. And I also have backed the 10-inch version of this, the Viwoods as well. So I don't know how all this stuff is eventually going to shake out. I really like the device though, and I really like the idea of, you know, having it on the top of the desk where I can kind of monitor it, see what changes are going to be happening, because this is a pretty dynamic company right now. They've been really exciting to work with and to follow as they've done all these updates. So it's hard for me to imagine this going into the drawer. But then again, I've got a lot of devices I got to juggle, and I'm just not quite sure how this will shake out in the end. But I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's helpful to know, you know, where I stand with these devices and what my thinking is going forward. And again, there's great devices in that drawer. The Books Go 10.3, I thought was a fantastic device. It's in the drawer. It just didn't fit in any of my workflows. And there's other really good ones there too. So going in the drawer is not a negative thing, but it does happen even to the best of devices. Don't think it's going to happen here, but then again, I'm not so sure because at some point, you know, you got to keep charging these devices and rotating them, and I don't know. It's a good problem to have. I'll just put it that way. So this is not necessarily going to be my last video on this. You know, as always, there's going to be additional updates to this device, and as those come out, then I'll probably do kind of follow-up videos and keep you appraised of those as they happen. But for now, this really does end the main part of the review series for the Viwoods Mini. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions, please just pop those into the comments. And until then, I look forward to seeing you next time.